patient came in for one thing, we were surprised, and cardiac arrest, and now here we are at an end-of-life situation that we didn't anticipate was going to happen, and we don't have the answers as to why that happened. So we talked a little bit about that, and maybe it's helpful sometimes to have the answers as to why something happened, and sometimes it's not helpful to have those answers. Having the answers, not having the answers, it's still sad.
Good, beautiful morning. My name is Bobby Fleck. I'm a chaplain resident at a Level 1 Regional Trauma Center. Today is starting off as a beautiful day outside. This really is first thing in the morning of an on-call shift, and we'll see if what I'm about to say will come back and bite me a little bit later. But I was talking to a security guard, actually the head of our security here at the hospital yesterday, while I was filling in for another chaplain who was unable to come to work. We were in the emergency department, and I saw this security officer a couple of times back to back. And I said, hey man, it's been kind of busy today for me. I imagine it's been busy for you as well. We tend to show up at the same things, like traumas, codes, things like that. And I said, it really doesn't matter sometimes, right? It doesn't matter what day or what time, that sort of thing. And he goes, well, it's a beautiful day outside, so it's going to be a busy day here in the emergency department. And I said, that's right. It is funny that when I first started as a chaplain resident, actually back when I was an intern 2 years ago here at the same hospital, I often was kind of gloomy when we would have rainy days. It would affect me and make me maybe a little bit sad or a little bit slower that day. But actually, I look forward to those days on the shift itself because they tended to be a lot slower, a lot more quiet, if you will. Days like this that are really beautiful and warm outside, especially during the summer when school's out, middle of the week, or even especially on weekends when it is nice outside and it is warm and it is a break. Those tend to be very, very busy times in the emergency department as people are getting outside and they are doing a little bit more risky behavior, a little bit more fun behavior, and accidents happen in the midst of that. So that's typically what happens in the emergency department as well. So we'll see. Here we are, first thing in the morning. It's a little after 7 o'clock. Came in about an hour before my shift starts today. Today's actually an on-call shift for me. So we'll see. I have class this morning for a couple of hours. I've got a webinar scheduled this afternoon that I'm hopeful to be able to attend. But we'll see what the pager says. I'll be here for another 12 hours from this moment for an in-person on-call, and then I'll go home for at-home 12-hour call where I could be called back in if need be. So anyhow, I say all that to say, let's see what today is going to be. I invite you to come along with me on this on-call shift, day in the life of a resident chaplain at a Level 1 Regional Trauma Center.
Well, that's interesting. I don't believe in bad omens at all, but as I was checking the pager this morning, beginning this on-call shift, I'm noticing that there are actually no missed calls over the last 12 hours. That may be the first time that that's happened as I've checked in on an on-call shift. When we go home for that at-home shift, we leave the pager at work. So what that means is that first on-call chaplain that comes in the next day grabs the pager and checks the pages to see what has been missed or what needs to be attended to. Basically, that tells us what traumas or codes or pages came in overnight that we need to prioritize and triage to follow up first thing in the morning. The fact that there's none on here, it's going to be kind of interesting. Wonder what that means. Well, it has been a busy on-call shift. If you remember, first thing this morning, I said that it was a beautiful day outside, and I wondered how that was going to affect patient care and especially incoming traumas and things like that. Typically, when it's a nice day outside, that means we're going to have a lot of incoming traumas because people get a little bit more courage and a little bit more adventurous about being outside and in the environment. So that means maybe a little bit more activity. And with increased activity means that increased accidents and things like that. So that was definitely part of the case today. We did have some busyness as far as incoming traumas with motor vehicle accidents and falls. Things like that are pretty standard trauma responses for us. What made this particular on-call shift a little bit more heavy for me were the number of deaths that I participated in responding to. Two of those happened in my typical regular units, so I responded to those, even with other chaplains here. Responded, took care of a family member that was grieving the loss of their family member, their younger family member, which would be their child, their adult child. This person was in their 50s or so that had passed, and the family member was probably late 70s, early 80s. And this family member was grieving because the patient had made a decision to go comfort care with the consultation from our palliative care department. And the patient elected to go comfort care while the family member was not here. So the family member was struggling a little bit with, hey, I knew that this was going to be coming, but I'm also sad and shocked with the fact that the person made the decision to go ahead with this without me. My role in that was to support this family member, explore some of those feelings of shock and grief, and ultimately this family member requested some space, which I assured the family member that I would do and told the family member that I was there for them as they grieved when and if they needed me. And reported back to the nurses and nurse practitioner and doctor as well, who was caring for this patient, the family member's decision and desire for some sacred space. So I got to advocate for that with the care team. Something that I just got finished with was another transition to comfort care from a different ICU, not my typical ICU, but this occurred after chaplains are not present. So my job as the on-call chaplain is to respond to all those requests that happen when other folks are not here. So I went and spent time with a family member, an adult child of a family member whose parent had passed. The patient came in for a small bowel obstruction that was addressed, and then the patient suffered cardiac arrest, was resuscitated, and subsequently was declining and not showing any signs of improvement. The patient had been trached from that intervention, and now the adult child was faced with the decision to either seek continued measures or to allow the patient to pass peacefully to transition to comfort care again. Similarly to patient that I just said earlier in the day. What was very different about this is the patient's life was being sustained through breathing machines, through the trach, and this adult child was going to need to make a decision to transition to comfort care, which for him meant typically what people think about, the unplugging the plug, so to speak, on a person. What was really interesting and helpful in this interaction is this family member came to the decision verbally as he was processing this with me that this family member was going to put the person, the patient, in God's hands, pray for a miracle, and ultimately trust that God would provide. What great insight. That is so often what, if I get a chance to offer that wisdom and that grace, that counseling to family members who are having to make that decision, that is something that I say is that, it's in God's hands now. And we don't get to decide when someone stops breathing or not. In the case of that patient that I said to start with, they made the decision consciously. For this patient that I'm talking about now, the family member knew the patient's wishes not to be intubated, sustained, trached, and the family member knew what the patient wanted, and now it was just a matter of making a decision on behalf of the patient, which is an easy decision in some sense, but ultimately is not in another. Compounded with that, this family member was struggling with, the patient came in for one thing, we were surprised, and cardiac arrest, and now here we are at an end-of-life situation that we didn't anticipate was going to happen, and we don't have the answers as to why that happened. So we talked a little bit about that, and maybe it's helpful sometimes to have the answers as to why something happened, and sometimes it's not helpful to have those answers. Having the answers, not having the answers, it's still sad. It's still gratefully sad that you're losing someone that you really, really care about. I got the honor, the gift, the grace of staying with this family member and being trusted to stay with the family member as the patient breathed their last breath. Got to watch this family member care for their parent in the last moments. Before that happened, we talked about honoring our parents, which is a Christian statement, a Jewish statement actually, honoring your father and your mother. And for this family member, this was an opportunity to honor the family, honor the parent, and care for someone who had provided so much care for this family member. And so I watched as the family member wiped tears away and caressed the head, reassured them that it was going to be okay. I heard the family member call on their faith and ask Jesus to take the family member soon, that there would be no suffering, that peace would come. I decided to play some soft instrumental music, hymns on my phone, held the patient's hand as we both watched the patient take their last breath. It was a very beautiful, peaceful moment in so many ways. The family member didn't know when the patient had stopped breathing. I could tell that it had stopped a number of ways. The color in the face, the deep breaths that had happened occasionally had stopped, and there was a stillness and a peace. And in walked two of our nurses to confirm the patient's heart had stopped, and there was no more breathing, no more breath sounds, no more heart sounds. And I hugged this family member, comforted them in their grief and sorrow. Just was a shoulder for them to cry on in this moment. Great sadness in so many ways, great peace in so many ways. The Bible says really clearly that we grieve not as those who do not have hope, but we grieve as those who do have hope. knowing that this world is not the end, knowing that this life is ultimately not the ultimate end for us, and that an eternal rest and embrace by God's amazing love for us is the ultimate plan. That loving, warm, comforting hug from the Father to welcome us into his embrace is ultimately one of the things we pray for and hope for and find peace in. And while we grieve and have sadness, and we sure do as humans, as people, God created us with deep emotions, and there is great sadness and grief and loss that comes with that. We don't grieve as those that don't have hope. We grieve, yes, but we grieve with hope. So in that moment where I held the hand of this patient, praying softly, listening to instrumental music, comforting this adult child of this patient, it was a sacred moment, a holy moment, a peaceful moment that I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to attend with this patient and this family, just be a representative of God's unconditional love for them. That's quite a blessing for me in that too, and a stillness, a reassurance for me. Yes, there's sadness. Yes, there's hope. Yes, there's love. I wonder if a part of that would be an encouragement to you today as you're going through whatever it is that you're going through. If there's sadness, grief, sorrow, anxiety, anger, fear, whatever it is that's going on, know that you have a God who knows what that's like. Take comfort and hope in knowing that God knows you and sees you right where you are and is there present with you in the midst of it. His word says that he promises never to leave us or forsake us. And I take great hope and courage knowing that God is right there in the midst of whatever it is that we go through, holding our hand, loving us, caring for us, reassuring us that it's going to be okay, that he loves us, he cares for us. May you be blessed by that today. May you see God's incredible love for you. Be encouraged. Take heart. If you're grieving, grieve. If you're sad, be sad. If you're angry, be angry. But there is hope. There is love. God is there in the midst of it all. Reach out to somebody else in your life today as well. Let them know that you love them, that you need them. You're not alone in this. God sends messengers to us all the time. God sends comfort to us in many kinds of forms. May we have the eyes to see God's love for us. May we have the ears to hear God's comforting words to us today. May we have the feelings to feel God's embrace and courage that he brings to us this day. May God bless you. Thanks for being with me today. Until we meet again, goodbye.